This is the third, the final of 3 lectures where I'm going to be summarising what to me is one of the most helpful, short, readable summaries about this thing, ethnographic research. And we were last on this page, and we reached the point where we talked about theoretical saturation, which is one way of saying that when we are asking questions, we are no longer getting any more information. We're just hearing the same thing. That means that we've done enough. But we haven't quite done enough on summarising this chapter, and so this is the last bit. So why don't we go to full screen now, and we'll head in, and we'll pick up with reminding ourselves about the distinctive parts of ethnographic writing. The first generation of ethnographers wrote in a style termed ethnographic realism, which was derived from the natural sciences. This was a mode of writing that seeks to represent the reality of a whole world or form of life. But George Marcus, who is a very important writer, and there are some videos interviewing George Marcus and Fisher and James Clifford that he has worked with, he makes the following comment. Ethnographic realism is marked by an all-encompassing description of another culture, an all-seeing yet distant narrator, composite rather than specific individuals, reference to fieldwork only to establish the presence of the ethnographer, a focus on everyday activities, a rigid assertion that the emic perspective is represented. Sweeping statements preferred over accounts of specific details, the use of jargon and abstract conceptions that disregard the context of native language. The style here is first-hand, present tense, perpetually existing. The ethnographer's past fieldwork is portrayed in the eternal present. James Clifford wrote, "The goal of ethnographic realism is to give the reader a sense of you are there because I was there." So Marcus and Fisher in Writing Culture, this is 1986, wrote that these classic monographs tended to be organised around 5 frames: life cycle, life history, ritual, aesthetic genres, and dramatic incident of conflict. These themes are described through narratives and vignettes, short impressionistic scenes that focus on one moment or give a particular insight into a character, idea, or setting. Many maintain a classic trope or common theme, such as a first encounter or arrival during fieldwork. Over the last few years, however, 50 years, post-colonial writers have developed a critique of ethnographic realism, accusing strong authorial narratives of the first generation of ethnographers of ethnocentrism and questioning the authority of these monographs. They raise questions of representation, which is the question of the ethnographer's ability and power to actually portray something or someone else. So a number of books, many of whom were co-written with between George Marcus and James Clifford and Michael Fisher, shone, and these were all in the 1980s, shone new light on ethnographic writing. These authors declared a crisis of ethnography, maintaining Western researchers could no longer portray non-Western peoples with uncontested authority, and inserted that cultural representation is always partial, contested, and political. The authors identified and encouraged experimental texts that are unconventional, they are polyphonic, using many voices, and heteroglossic, or having contrasting styles of communication and points of view. These experimental ethnographers tend towards two strategies. They write with reflexivity, or introspection. Their accounts examine their own social historical locations, in which they are also actors in the story, in order to lessen the distance between ethnographer and informant, and to negate the suggestion of an all-seeing yet distant narrator. Or they include varied perspectives of ethnographic informants in an attempt to show rather than tell the reader. So how do we know whether an ethnography is good? And so by an ethnography, we need to point out that an ethnography is both a product and a methodology. We use the word ethnography to refer to a way of doing research. But this is a bit of play on words, because when we have done ethnographic research and we write a book, this is an ethnography. So the most important concept, which we have already mentioned in previous lectures, is this idea of validity, and we have a table on the left to illustrate the different types of validity and what a problem with validity has. How questions of validity, or how we know that research findings are trustworthy, are constants in conversations about research methodology. Ethnographers must convince supervisors, readers and reviewers that their work is credible, that the events in the field are described accurately and in scientific terms, and that the research findings are valid. Ethnographic validity is determined according to all three canons: theoretical, candor, the ethnographer's path, and the fieldwork evidence. In other words, validity-rich ethnography is transparent. The ethnographer must show how their choice about fieldwork were guided by emerging theory. Ideally, information about the ethnographer's path, including the ethnography size and range, demographic data about the informants, and the path from one informant to the next. Ethnographic validity is strengthened by knowing who and how many people participated in the research and the range of perspectives they brought to the inquiry. Another way of assuring that we know something is good is this idea of triangulation, or the process of using data from different sources to support a conclusion. This is very important to validity. Testing one source of information against another to strip away alternative explanations and attempt to prove an hypothesis is one of a number of good definitions of triangulation. So that is my summary over 3 lectures of a very, very accessible, well-written summary of this thing called ethnographic research. And I recommend that you reread that, and also read other similarly short, recent summaries about this important topic. Remember that when we begin to get to grips with an area, it's important that we start with recently published works. It's important that we start with short dictionary and encyclopedia articles, chapters in handbooks. We don't need to jump in and read an entire book on a particular topic. Start with something recent, start with something small. Use a reference tool to help you understand any and all of the topics that are new to you. You must have it in a place that you can find it. If it's a PDF, put it on your desktop, and you need to know something, you click on that, you open it up, you press find, you type in the term, boom. And if you have it organized like that, very, very soon you will easily, quickly, conveniently begin to understand these new terms. Don't depend on Google or Wikipedia to do this for you. We need to be interacting with credible, peer-reviewed, high-quality books from reputable publishers that you are able to cite in your papers and in your literature review and in your thesis. And the sooner you get those resources and you begin to interact with them, the better you will be. So I'll include some of those comments in the following up X-Mind. But thanks for watching. See you again next time.